If we want a six-pack, then we work to build beautiful abs using different exercises for sculpting and losing weight for definition. Likewise, if we need a strong back, it's about good posture and ergonomics. But what about the pelvic floor? Does it need the same attention that we give our back or our abs, for example? Or can it look after itself? Stand by, Go Healthy for Good starts right now. Hello and welcome to Go Healthy for Good. Both bladder and bowel control improve with a strong, coordinated pelvic floor. For women, a bulging prolapse can be helped by pelvic floor exercises. And for men, recovery from prostate surgery is improved too. Now, it's time to meet Juliana and Henrique.
So when we got married, he used to love going out to eat or ordering delivery, and I wasn't used to that. And I can see that he took that from his dad's side because his dad loved junk food. So he was like always, oh, let's have burger or pizza for dinner tonight. When we got married, he approached me once or a few times, suggesting we should go vegetarian or try to go vegetarian. And I was like, why would I do that? You know, why would I deprive myself of eating something that I really like? It doesn't make any sense because I just didn't have any notion of eating for your health or the impact of diet in your health.
At least in Brazil, we have this impression that being vegetarian is just like eat vegetables. We think just raw vegetables in the salad, and you will eat salad all the time, and that's your life. You're gonna be like a cow or like a chicken just eating corn, you know.
We had no idea that our diet had an impact on our life and our health in general. But we were feeling we had a lot of inflammation going on. So I had a lot of headaches. We both had a lot of headaches, migraines,
sinus,
hay fever, lower back pain. So a lot of those issues that a lot of people have commonly, but we had it frequently, and we would go to the doctor around once a week or once every 15 days, and the diagnosis would always be stress, never pointing out to the fact that we were eating really poorly because everybody eats that way in Brazil. So people are just used to go to the pharmacy and get over-the-counter solutions for migraine and things like that. And they just keep eating the way they're eating, and that's what we were doing.
To be honest, I was feeling drained, my energy was being drained. Because we spent 2 or 3 hours every week in a doctor to see what was happening, and next week was something different and something different, and then again and again and again and again. So on a certain point was just why I'm not healthy.
We didn't know there was a problem. So it's not like we wanted to be, of course we wanted to be healthy, but we couldn't see the problem. So we weren't pursuing anything.
We thought that we were okay because our body was okay compared to the other people that was around us. We could see a lot of people overweight and more sick than us, and we thought just oh, that's fine. We are okay. Juliana's skinny. I'm quite skinny too, so that's fine. That's a sign of healthy. If you are skinny, that's what we think. Yeah, we are skinny, we are healthy, so that's it. Until the day that we were about to come to Australia, and we decided to do a complete checkup in the hospital, and then we discovered that we had
high cholesterol. Very high cholesterol. After we realized that we were leaving the country with high cholesterol, and the doctor had a serious conversation with us, that we wouldn't have access to health like we had in our own country, here in Australia.
That will cost a lot for us.
It would cost a lot for us, so then we decided that maybe we had to do some changes.
We'll learn what those changes were later in the show, speak with a pelvic floor physiotherapist, work on flexibility with Colton, and take a look at a superfood. But first, the news. In the headlines, protein requirements in seniors, mild brain trauma linked to migraines, and diet influences the severity of COVID. Older adults may benefit from a higher protein intake in order to maintain bone health. Over 2,000 community-dwelling seniors completed food frequency questionnaires and were followed for 5 years to assess fracture frequency and serial bone density scans. They were stratified into 3 groups based on how much their total calories were derived from protein as opposed to carbs and fats. Those in the top 1/3 consumed at least 15%, and those in the lowest third consumed less than 13% of calories from protein. Those with higher protein intake had a 2 to 6% higher mean bone mineral density in hip and spine and a much lower risk of spinal fractures than those in the lowest protein intake group. So seniors, learn to read nutritional labels and see if you're getting about 1.2 grams of protein for every kilo of body weight or 1 gram for every 2 pounds. A study of over 1,000 migraine patients found that over 1/3 have a history of mild traumatic brain injury. These patients had more migraine-related disability, were more likely to have dizziness, vertigo, and difficulty finding words, and higher levels of anxiety and depression than those without the history of trauma. Their headaches were more likely to be triggered by a lack of sleep, bright lights, and by reading. This study is another reminder about the importance of protecting our brain from concussion injuries. A case control study has shown that frontline health workers on vegetarian diets have much lower odds of developing moderate to severe COVID infection. A global network of healthcare professionals working across 6 countries were recruited into this COVID trial. All completed a food frequency questionnaire, and 568 out of 2,900 reported having symptoms of COVID-19 and testing positive. 138 of these had moderate to severe infection, and the other 430 had mild or very mild infection. There was no association between diet and the risk of getting infected, but the odds of moderate to severe COVID infection was 73% lower in those on a plant-based diet and 59% lower on a vegetarian plus fish diet compared to those not eating these diets. Those on a low-carb or high-protein diet had nearly 4 times the odds of moderate to severe infection as those on a plant-based diet. So perhaps a plant-based diet will prove more protective if new variants are coming our way and we only have the vaccine to protect ourselves. I'm Dr. Nerida McKibben, and that's today's health news. On today's show, we have Sian Beattie, a specialised physiotherapist with many years' experience working with women with pelvic floor problems. I asked her if there's something extra a pelvic floor physiotherapist can offer someone who's already doing pelvic floor exercises on their own.
Yeah, so as a pelvic floor physiotherapist, we complete a full assessment, and sometimes what's happening is that particularly if patients have Googled or people have Googled the pelvic floor, then they've often found what we call the Kegel type exercises, which is the advice to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And so people work really hard at squeezing their muscles, but they don't necessarily fully let those muscles go. So any muscle has what we call a full range of movement. So with my arm, we have full extension and full flexion. And it's the same with the pelvic floor muscles. They have this full lift and this full release.
So if we did that with our arm, we'd just stay up like this.
Yes, it'd be like doing this.
And we would never open.
Yeah, it'd be like squeezing your fist the whole time and never actually opening your hand up, fully. So it's important for muscles to go through that full range of movement. And particularly, with people who've got stress incontinence or urgency, they're constantly feeling that need to tighten up, to hold on, to keep everything in.
Because they're so afraid of leaking.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's taking over their life.
Yeah, so they're afraid that if they let go, everything's just going to empty out. And that's often not the case. And often what we find is that if those muscles aren't allowed to fully switch off, then they can't effectively switch on when they need to. So these are people who, you know, they've been practicing their Kegels or their pelvic floor exercises for their stress incontinence, for their urgency, and nothing's improving. And that's often what we find is that one of the causes might be is that those muscles are just never completely switching off. So if I've already got most of a fist and then I need to hold something tightly, it's really hard to produce enough effort to hold that tightly if I'm already squeezing those muscles tight. Whereas if I allow my muscles to switch off, they get that recovery, then they can contract and do what's effective. So it's the same with those pelvic floor muscles. In order to get that effective lift, effective closure, they need to release completely.
Release completely and give those muscles a rest. That's what we do when we're working out muscles at the gym, isn't it? It makes so much sense. More wisdom from Sian in the next segment, so stick around.
Hey, my friends, I'm Colton, your coach, and today we're talking about flexibility. Let's get stretching. All right, team, we're gonna start with a chest stretch. Hands behind the back, interlace the fingers, big proud chest, and pull those arms back. You know, can I get you to turn sideways for us? So notice how she's lifting her chest and pulling those arms back to open up the chest. She's also stretching the biceps to the front of the arm while she's at it. To deepen that bicep stretch part, you can actually turn those palms down towards your bum. Opposite direction. Turn it the other way for me. Flip it down, down. It's hard, right? Yeah, see, the way that's hard to do it. Team, while they're holding this stretch, you can hold this at home. Let's talk about flexibility for just a moment. Flexibility is about increasing your body's range of motion. It's about making it more limber, meaning it moves more freely and more easily, and it reduces pain in the body. When we're tight, things can be painful. It's hard to move. Bones are constricted and pressed together. Joints are tight. Flexibility helps to reduce and relieve all of that tension. Let's take it for a back stretch now, team. Reaching forward, hollow chest, stretching that upper back. So Angela, we're gonna turn sideways. If you wanna feel like you've just been punched in the chest, not that I'm a violent man, but can't excuse an opportunity to do this. All right, so hitting that chest, hollow as you can, reaching those shoulder blades forward, feeling that stretch through the upper back and through the shoulder blades. You could even deepen that stretch by grabbing one wrist unit and pulling it across. So you're really getting behind that one shoulder blade, and then you can switch to the other one. Now, as you do this, how long should we be holding stretches? In total, we want to be holding each stretch for at least a minute. We're going to do about 20 seconds of each right now, but at home you can repeat it for 3 rounds when we're finished here, so you get that full minute of each stretch. Let's move into a shoulder stretch, team. Taking one arm across the front, put that opposite hand in front of it and pull it across. You'll feel that stretch through the shoulder. All of us need it in a slightly different place. So you can try lowering your arm down slightly to change the angle of that stretch, or up a little bit, and you'll feel that it changes where exactly in that shoulder you're feeling the stretch as you move down and up. Find the place where you feel the stretch the deepest and hold it there. Let's switch. Doing the same thing the opposite way, using the opposite hand as a lever to deepen that stretch. You might feel that it even gets into the upper back as well here. That's great, we want that, right? So the other thing that stretching does for us is it reduces our risk of injury. So many injuries in life, my friends, come from having a tight body. Those joints have nowhere to move, and there's constant tension on the tendons. That is the connective tissue that joins our muscles to our bones. And when there's constant tension on it, eventually all that tension creates small tears, creates micro trauma, creates injury, and that's been so tight for so long that sometimes it can just pop. That's not something we want our tendons to do. All right, let's go ahead and take one arm down our back for a tricep stretch. You're gonna take one arm overhead, grab the elbow with the opposite hand and pull it down, trying to keep your head as upright and straight as you can. Good adjustment, Una. So if you look, can you do what you were doing a second ago and turn sideways? And Angelo, can you do what you're doing and turn sideways? Angelo's keeping his back flat, so he's not cheating by using his back. It's nice and neutral, but he's keeping his head face straight up. When you put that head down out of the way, it's not a great place for your neck to be, but more importantly, you're reducing that stretch. Watch when Una takes her head up. Can you feel that stretch deepen? Awesome. Let's switch arms. So we're reducing the risk of injury. we're increasing our mobility and our range of motion, which means our body's more limber, which means that we have less pain, not just throughout the day, but when you wake up in the morning, when all that tension tends to be built up. So doing a stretching routine every night before bed is a tremendous way to wake up in less pain. Let's go ahead and move on to our legs. We're gonna start with a quad stretch. So take one foot behind you, grab onto that foot. You're welcome at home to grab onto a wall or a chair or a sofa, whatever you've got near you. One thing we wanna make sure we're doing, can I get Angelo to turn sideways? We wanna make sure, that's the way, that we've got a straight line through our hip. Sometimes we have that knee forward. Can you do that knee forward? That creates a lack of angle there, and part of that quad runs across the hip, so it's not getting stretched. You need that knee back. Let's switch legs. Another thing that can happen in Una, if you can turn sideways for this one, is sometimes we've got the knee back, but then our top half is bent over. So then we've created that bend again. So you wanna keep that top half upright as you're keeping that knee back, so you get that nice straight line, getting that full benefit of the stretch. From there, guys, we're gonna go down into a hamstring stretch. Now we're going to the back of the legs. We're gonna put one foot forward with the toes up, push the hips back in our hinging movement, and the more you push back, the more you're gonna feel those hamstrings. It's amazing when you do that hinge rather than just folding over from your back, how quickly you feel it, right, friends? So a lot of times we'll just fold over and think it's a stretch, but actually when you push those hips back, hinging, if you were with us talking about fundamental movements, you'll really get that stretch. Let's try and add a little more. If you can reach it, grab your toes, pull them back. If you can't reach it, just try and touch your toes to your shin. You're gonna feel that stretch get into your calf or the lower leg now as well. And when we have a limber hamstring, what are we less likely to get? A torn hamstring. Yuna's recovering right now from a torn hamstring, and she knows now how important that stretching is by experience, right, Yuna?
100%.
Let's switch legs. Hinging those hips back, just getting the hamstring first. Let's focus on that upper leg first before we bring in that lower leg. So hamstrings tend to be tight on a lot of people, and while they don't often cause injuries to the other joints, they a lot of times cause injury to themselves by being tight, right? We get those pulls and strains and tears and injuries, and sometimes they can take a really long time to heal from. Let's add the toe, grab that toe and pull it back. So it's really important that we stretch each of these muscles for the benefits that stretching each of them brings us. Quad stretches, great example of one that can benefit the lower back pain. The quads and the hip flexors come across and grab onto the lower back. That's where they sit. So they can cause constant tension on that lower back. Also, knee injury is often caused by those tight quads as well. All right, we are going to move on from there, team. We are going to now move to our, it's kind of like the world's greatest stretch, but we're not gonna do the whole thing. So we're gonna go down into our push-up position, walk out to that push-up. Gonna take one foot, step it forward into a deep lunge, press those hips down into the floor, take the inside hand up, reach it for the ceiling. Yep, that's it. So it feels pretty much the same so far, right? But we're not done yet. Now we're gonna take that elbow, we're gonna try and touch the floor inside your foot. You may be able to get there, you might not. Let's try again, see if we can get a little bit lower. Reach up, then see if you can get that elbow close to the floor. We're almost there. Yuna is, oh, it's so close. Angel's got a little bit further to go, but you know what? He's doing what he can with his body where it's at. And that's what's important. As he continues to do this regularly, what's gonna happen? We're gonna get lower and lower, and you watch. Next time you see Angelo, he'll be touching the floor with his elbow. He'll be touching his foot to his nose. He'll be doing it all. Let's switch legs, team. Reaching up to the sky. Then reaching that elbow for the floor. And we'll do that just one more time real slow. So take your time on that stretch and then do it again in your own time. As they press those hips to the floor, they're working their hip flexor stretch. And again, those hip flexors, where they connect to is your lower back. So if they're tight, they're constantly pulling on that lower back. It can be a great source of pain in the lower back, just like tight glutes can, which is what their front leg is doing. While the back leg is stretching the hip flexor, the front leg is stretching the glutes. And then as that reach, they're opening up and stretching that thoracic spine of the upper back, the chest. They're doing so many stretches here at once. That's why it's called the world's greatest stretch, right? Team, last reach, bring it back down, and then we can come up. We're done. Thank you guys so much. Great work, my friends. Remember, more is possible for you. Commit to making small changes in your life, and we'll give you the tools you need to be healthier, happier, and fit for a purpose, your purpose.
In Brazil, Juliana and Henrique were young and disease-free, yet they saw the doctor for one thing or another every week or so. They considered themselves healthy. They ate out a lot, and then when they thought about moving to Australia, they went for a checkup and found they had very high cholesterol. Fortunately, their doctor advised them to make serious changes since the cost of healthcare would be very expensive in their new country. Here's what they did. Watch.
Yeah, so it was surprising when we arrived in Australia and we met a lot of people in our church that follow principles of diet, of healthy diet, and they started influencing us a little bit, like at a time. The CHIP program was a big part of our switch, but I think there was a process that led us to doing the CHIP program, because when we arrived in Australia, we were still closed-minded to a healthy diet, so we wouldn't do the CHIP program then. But after meeting so many people that were concerned about their health and eating well, and then we did a trip to the outback for 20 days in the middle of nowhere. We couldn't bring a fridge, so we had to eat basically vegan and plant-based, because you can't like keep meat and dairy without a fridge. And then after that, we arrived back from the trip, and after eating vegan for 20 days, I was like, maybe we should do the CHIP program. One of our friends that has a healthy diet, she was influencing us a lot. She runs the CHIP program at her house. The CHIP program is a complete health improvement program, and mostly they were like just old people going to her house to do the program. But she convinced us after we came back from the trip, and we gave it a try. It was funny because they were all looking at us in the meetings and thinking that, what are they doing here? They're young and slim, but they didn't know we had high cholesterol. Yeah, so before we started the CHIP program, we had to do a blood test, because how it works is you do a blood test before and then after to see the change. And when we did the first blood test, we still had high cholesterol, and it was very upsetting because we had reduced the meat consumption a lot, and I was very discouraged. I just told him maybe we are not meant to have good levels, you know, maybe we are meant to have high cholesterol for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And after 3 weeks in the CHIP program, we did another blood test, and then I remember I was upstairs and then he came yelling, "That's it, we're becoming plant-based." And he was holding some mail in his hands, and I was like, "What is happening?" And he told me, we received the results from our blood test and our cholesterol levels are all good. And during the program, despite having the bad cholesterol and etc. and being discouraged, we were feeling really good.
Yeah.
We had a lot of energy and we were feeling great. So that's what kept us going for the 3 weeks. And then after the 3 weeks, we got the good results, so we were even more excited.
We're talking today with pelvic floor physiotherapist Sian Beattie, and we'll be covering some sensitive topics that may not be suitable for younger viewers. In the last segment, Sian mentioned that sometimes pelvic floor muscles are not functioning well because they're constantly working. I asked her how she can tell if they are in a constant state of tension.
So that's where the pelvic floor muscle assessment comes in. And before we even do any internal examinations, we're looking at posture. We're looking at how people sit. So often I find that people will come and see me and they're often in this sort of very closed and tight position. You know, their legs are often crossed, or their arms are folded, or they're in this bent position. And so just actually allowing everything to open up and soften and release. So posture is the first thing we look at.
Wow, I never would have thought that.
And then looking at how people breathe as well. So again, that anxiety, that worry about leaking, that worry about pain, and all of that can change how we breathe as well. So often we tend to, when we're in that sort of daily experience, we breathe a lot from up here. And so a lot of our breathing then is very sort of upper airways, shoulders are elevated, everything's sort of tight and tense. So the diaphragm's not getting its ability to go through its full range of movement as well. So as a pelvic floor physio, we don't just focus on the pelvis. We look at the whole body. We look at how someone's moving as a whole, and how they're sitting, how they're breathing. Are they getting that really nice diaphragmatic breathing? Is their stomach moving in and out? Are they getting expansion through the rib cage? So we're looking at all of that before we even start looking at the pelvis. But then we'll do a pelvis examination. Right. So that will involve both assessing the muscles both on the outside. So this is a really nice model that I use a lot with patients because it shows this is the tailbone here. Okay. And again, this is a female model. So just to clarify that as well. And this is the pubic bone at the top. These are the muscles on the outside. So when I'm completing an assessment, I'll be looking on the outside first of all, asking a patient to contract. So I'm checking first of all that they're doing the right technique. Have they got that awareness? Can they actually feel their muscles? Can they feel them switching on? Can they fully release them? So when they let go, do they switch off? So we're looking for movement through here. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Right. And then when I complete an internal examination, that then involves inserting just a single finger. So as physios, we don't use speculums, and that a lot of patients come quite concerned that there's going to be a speculum examination, particularly for patients with pelvic pain. But yeah, we don't use speculums because we're testing those muscles rather than wanting to
see
look
anything
inside yet. So with an internal examination, it's then inserting the finger and then testing these muscles. So what we're doing is we're testing what the resting tone of those muscles is. So say, for example, if that was the shoulder and I was testing shoulders, like, do they feel tight? Are there those knots that you get in those muscles? Or are they switching off? Are they soft? Is there particularly tender spots throughout all these muscles? So with an internal assessment, it does involve, just using the finger to test around, asking patients to, again, contract, release, and soften. So we're looking for that whole range of movement of all these muscles through the pelvis there. So just making sure that there's that awareness, there's that coordination, there's the good timing, and there's that lift. More importantly, I think sometimes that release as well. And so for patients that are experiencing pain, that awareness and that being switched on, it's really important to be able to feel that and be conscious of that.
So thinking about bladder control, how do you teach coordination?
So with pelvic floor muscle rehabilitation, part of it is use of the knack technique. So that's that contracting those muscles before an activity. So making sure that they're switching on before coughing, sneezing, lifting, those elements of things, but also looking at it from a functional aspect and getting those muscles working in conjunction with the other muscles in the body. So the pelvic floor muscles don't work in isolation. So yes, it's important to make sure that initially patients can feel those muscles, are aware of those muscles, can feel them completely switching on, completely relaxing as well, but also working with breathing, working with the hip muscles. So in those activities where we're lifting, that everything's working together. So, and that's where also doing speed exercises and things like that as well, they're really important too, because that teaches that coordination element as well. So it's focus on breath, it's focus on function, focus on speed, as well as using the knack technique.
We all need to learn the knack. You'll find some good teaching videos on YouTube for that. More from Sian in the next segment, and I'll be back shortly to answer a few of your questions, so stay with us. It's question time. Someone asked, what do you recommend as supplements for menopausal hot flashes and insomnia? Well, there are a number of herbs that are effective or help. And usually when you're doing herbs, you usually mix 3 or 4 in combination. And these herbs might include, you don't have to have them all, black cohosh, chaste tree, dong quai, licorice root, and milk thistle seed. Another option is to take a formulation, which has several of those in, called Remifemin. So that saves you having to formulate it yourself. But before starting any of those herbs, just check with your doctor that they won't interfere with any of the medications that you're on. Otherwise, you might talk to them about using hormone replacement therapy itself. Someone asks, is there a cure for postnasal drip? Well, postnasal drip is usually due to an allergy to something, so it can be helpful to establish what it is that you're reacting to so you can eliminate it and you don't have to treat symptoms all the time. It might be something in your environment, like grass pollen, or it could be in your diet, perhaps dairy or soy are common allergens. There is an effective supplement that I like called Moducare. You can try drinking more water, using a saline nasal drop to thin the mucus and to sort of wash out the pollen if it is in your environment. Vitamin C can help dry the mucus. And so that's why people use vitamin C for allergies and for colds. And then hot foot baths can help relieve congestion if you have congestion with it. But remember, hot foot baths are contraindicated if you have diabetes or peripheral arterial disease. Thanks for those questions. If you have a question, send it in using the contact details on the screen. And now let's head outside to the fruit and veggie stand. Kale is a brassica, so it's a cousin to cabbage, broccoli, collie, collard greens, Brussels sprouts, and that family. It comes curly or flat, green or purple, and doesn't form a head like the other brassicas. It abounds in the carotenoid lutein, which gives the nasturtium flower a vibrant yellow colour. And believe it or not, there's almost as much lutein in kale, though I think the green chlorophyll might overwhelm the yellow of the lutein. The retina in the eye accumulates lutein, especially in the macula, which is the area of the retina responsible for central vision, and therefore gets most of the exposure to sunlight and oxidative damage. Lutein will protect against macular degeneration and cataracts. Kale is also a source of indole 3-carbinol, which boosts DNA repair in cells and blocks the growth of cancer cells. It freezes well and it's sweetened by frost. Whether it's baked or dehydrated, it takes on the consistency of a potato chip, but of course it's a much healthier alternative. I like to braise it with fenugreek seeds, add a small dollop of aioli sauce on top and tuck into a large bowl of kale. Bon appetit! We're talking today about a sensitive topic that may not be suitable for younger viewers. Our guest is Sian Beattie, pelvic floor physiotherapist who helps women with pelvic pain. Here she shares what can be done.
So if we find particular points, then as a pelvic health physio, we can release those muscles. So like we would in any other part of the body, we can teach our patients to do self-massage. So that's either using their own finger, but often we'll use other devices. So using what we call dilators or vaginal trainers, which I don't have any with me today, unfortunately, but they're different sized tubes that can be inserted into the vagina to help teach. As you insert, you're learning to release those muscles. So the patient starts to focus on switching off and releasing and using the breath and using relaxation techniques as well to help release and let those muscles go. There's also other devices. I mean, we use vibrators sometimes as well to, again, trigger or pinpoint certain parts of the muscle. So again, like you would with muscles in the shoulder, you might use like a massage ball or something like that to release those muscles. As a physio, we can do it for a patient, but it's really important that patients learn to release those muscles themselves. So stretches, we've got visualization, we've got breathing, relaxation, massage, using different equipment to help with all of that. And all of those different techniques can help. But other things that can help as well is, again, going back to how we go to the toilet. So not straining. With the bowel, going when you feel that need to go, so that we're not constantly holding on and getting those harder, more difficult poos to empty, which can cause pain in themselves. So it's making sure that you're emptying your bowel regularly, making sure that you're emptying effectively, using that foot support, letting those muscles relax, thinking about when you're on the toilet, thinking about those muscles switching off and releasing and softening as you're sitting on the toilet. So all those things can help.
It's like being the conductor of an orchestra, but the effort will pay off, especially as we get a little older, or for women after childbirth. Now, consider this. In the Bible, the book of Hebrews was written as a letter to the Jewish Christians. They had been schooled in their faith traditions from birth, yet Hebrews 5:12 suggests that they still needed a teacher to give them the basic principles of the faith when they should have been able to teach. It says that everyone who only takes milk is unskilled in the word. He's only a babe. The solid food belongs to those who've put effort into understanding the deep things of God. People who don't just read the Bible, but study it for themselves. What's the difference? Well, study requires effort to understand the mysteries of the kingdom. It requires time and the Holy Spirit. So are you drinking spiritual milk like a baby? Or are you lingering in His presence, ingesting strong spiritual meat? Now, there's no shame in drinking spiritual milk. We all have to start somewhere. But as long as we advance in knowledge and understanding, sharing what we've learned with other people, so that we then return to the Word and grow in knowledge, wisdom, and maturity, ready to face the approaching storm.
Heart disease is not just a man's disease. A study reported in the New England Journal of Medicine compared two groups of middle-aged women. The first group had 80% fewer heart attacks than the second. What was the difference? The first group were all a healthy weight, did not smoke, and exercised at least 30 minutes a day. These things, maintaining a healthy weight, not smoking, and exercising, were the triple advantage against heart disease. A healthy heart is another ageless advantage.
We're talking today about a sensitive topic that may not be suitable for younger viewers. Sian Beattie is a pelvic floor physiotherapist, and in our last segment we were discussing how to help women with pelvic pain. Another problem for women can be pain with intercourse, so I asked Sian what she recommends.
So first of all, using all those different techniques that we've talked about, but also looking at, is it particular positions that cause that pain, and so then looking at, well, is that particular muscles, or is it stiffness in joints, or is it things like a pelvic organ prolapse or something like that? So what could be causing it? The other questions that I will ask are, is it pain on the external, around the vulva? Is it increased sensitivity? So that might be due to lots of different reasons. It could be trauma, it could be infections, it could be lots of different things like that that have caused that increased sensitivity around the vulval area. Or is it pain with initial penetration? And if it is, again, it could be, it's those more of those sort of superficial muscles, so that might be contracting or reacting to previous painful experiences that have happened, and so this is now more of a primitive response. It's a guarding mechanism. It's going back to that whole fight or flight mechanism, and so those muscles they've had a painful experience already. The body's had that painful experience, so the muscles are protecting. They're switching on, and so again, using things like what we call the down training, the releasing of those muscles, or using the dilators to desensitize, graded exposure, giving the body time to learn new painless experiences. And then finally, if it's pain with deeper penetration, that's where that internal examination comes in again, and trying to find out, is it specific muscles? Is it stiffness through the hips or through the back, or all these different elements that might be contributing to it? So each patient is an individual. That's why it's really important, I think, to go and see a pelvic health physiotherapist, because we can assess all those different elements to see what might be contributing to that particular problem. And then often, particularly if it's pain with intercourse, are there other elements as well? If there's been previous trauma, do they need to go and see a counsellor or a psychologist, or someone who can help with trauma counselling as well? So as physios, we don't just think of it as the muscles and the joints. It's what are those social elements or psychological elements that might be contributing, but that's not our area of speciality.
No, but you can rule out the physical,
Absolutely.
the structural issues that might then point them to that. Because some people may feel that it's not psychological in the first instance.
And sometimes those things only come to light after a number of appointments with us. Like sometimes the physio is the first person that anyone's ever spoken to about those things, or felt comfortable speaking to. And so because we get to spend time with patients, often, patients they'll go and see other health professionals, and they might have a 10 to 15 minute appointment.
Right.
And it's really just, what's the problem? Right, here we go. Whereas with physio, we're spending 30, 40, 60, sometimes 90 minutes with these patients. So we're really able to take that time, talk through things, look at that whole aspect of everything that might be influencing and causing these problems, and then identifying, is this something physio can help with, or are there other health professionals? But only when those people are ready.
Right.
That's the important thing.
Absolutely.
Is when they're ready to go and see those people. But being able to identify it is really important.
Henrik and Juliana were at the doctor every week for one thing or another. Nothing serious, or so they thought, until they learned they had very high cholesterol. On moving from Brazil to Australia, they could no longer afford to have all that medical attention, and they made the wise decision to make some serious lifestyle changes. They did the 3-week Complete Health Improvement Program, or CHIP, and saw a big drop in cholesterol and a huge rise in energy. But would they stick to it? Watch.
Having the type of diet that we were having for most of our life, we never thought that we would one day live with a lot of energy and not having caffeine, and free of pain and of inflammation in general.
Having the plant-based diet in my life is something that makes me enjoy the life, actually. Like if I could compare my old life to this new life, I would never regret to have this changing. It's just amazing.
We grew up seeing a lot of people eating unhealthy food, like fried chicken and chips all the time, and saying, if I die, at least I'll die happy. But they don't really realize that they're not happy, because at least we weren't happy, because we had migraines and pain and all types of inflammation going on. And after we changed our diet, we realized that when you are free of those things, then you're living fully.
Living free, so cool. Having a trained pelvic floor physiotherapist who can do a full pelvic assessment can be the recipe for success. Whether that be for incontinence, pelvic pain, pelvic floor awareness and coordination, or pain with intercourse. Some of these problems are more than physical though. There may be emotional or psychological trauma that needs to be addressed before the physical problem can be solved. That's all from me today. Thanks for joining us on Go Healthy for Good. I'll see you next time.